Iguazu falls on the border between Argentina and Brazil. In the early 17th century, Jesuit missionaries sailed south from here up the Paraná River into what is now Paraguay. On the riverbanks, they founded mission stations. 200,000 Native Americans fled to those agricultural settlements to avoid enslavement. Ruins of some of those Baroque towns still survive. The Jesuit state was under the protection of the King of Spain. The Native Americans had to convert to Christianity, but were safe from enslavement here. They learned farming and made music. The economic success of the Jesuit settlements provoked the envy of the Spanish colonists, and there were frequent clashes. Finally, in 1767, the Jesuits were expelled from Paraguay and their republic destroyed. In a church dating back to colonial times, we met a musician who was reviving the legacy of those Jesuit missionaries, the conductor Luis Sarrazin. Sarrazin has conducted groundbreaking research into the music of the Jesuit schools. He's also set up his own youth music project called Sonidos de la Tierra, Sounds of the Earth. Here, Sarrazin is conducting one of Sonidos' 20 youth orchestras. More than 12,000 children and teenagers across Paraguay are now members of Sonidos.
I was inspired by the Jesuit settlements. We started this project to improve the young people's everyday life. Many of them live on the streets, just like peasant farmers at their wits' end. Music can be a catalyst, bringing people together so that they can change their lives. That was the spirit of the Jesuit missions. There was a social network among the 30 settlements. Today, we also have a social network in Paraguay. It embraces 165 locations.
The flautist Juan was a guest on Paraguayan breakfast television, playing with a group of musicians from the garbage dump. They're all members of Sonidos de la Tierra. Their clarinets and flutes are made from old water pipes, their violins and guitars from tin cans. The show's host was clearly enthusiastic about the music. Fabio, the leader of the group, explains.
This is an old wooden spoon. And the bridge is also recycled wood. The cello is actually an old oil drum.
In a suburb of the Paraguayan capital Asunción, we meet Juan in the instrument workshop. He's a virtuoso on a flute made from an old water pipe. Nicola is in charge of the workshop. He'll soon have made his 1,000th guitar. It was he who taught Juan and Israel to drill, file, and use a lathe. Israel teases the first sounds from his own tin fiddle.
If you make your own instrument, it's very precious to you. It has a completely different value. We've learned a lot here. I didn't know how to use any of these tools before, and now I can make an instrument like this.
We make the instruments from trash, from tin cans and whatever we can find. A child can start learning to play on an instrument like this. That motivates the kids to change their lives, to get off the streets where they beg and steal.
The workshop was set up with assistance from the Jesuits. Gisela von Thumann works for the German Jesuit mission in Asunción. She's proud of Juan, but he isn't the first musician from the workshop to make a career for himself.
The fathers made the first instruments, as you can see here, from things like bottle tops and water pipes. I think that was the start. Then the people played. They were given lessons through Sonidos de la Tierra and became musicians. We even have people playing in the National Orchestra and in the Sinfonica.
A gigantic garbage dump looms over the suburb of Cateura on the outskirts of Asunción. This is where the trash pickers find the bits and pieces to make their flutes and fiddles. The catadores, as they're called, collect scrap metal and paper, wood and plastic for recycling. The work is filthy and dangerous and poorly paid. The catadores are exploited by middlemen. Nicolás is Sonidos' master instrument maker. He set up his workshop in a wooden hut. He also used to be a trash picker, but his life changed when Sonidos gave him an order for 500 guitars.
I walked in the garbage of Cateura for 12 years, in recycling. There are lots of buyers here. Some pay well, others badly.
Nicola makes guitars full-time now. A major bank sponsors Sonidos to pay for the instruments. Nicola's wife makes shirts and trousers out of old clothing. For the time being, they still live surrounded by garbage, and Nicola still keeps chickens and pigs, but they want to move away from the dump.
I never want to go back on the dump. I've got a new job now. I make guitars.
From the sale of his guitars, Nicola wants to build a cottage for himself and his wife. He got the idea for making instruments out of garbage when a child from the dump wanted to learn to play the violin through Sonidos. The child's parents were too poor to buy him one, so they began making fiddles out of garbage. The children from Cateura now learn on proper instruments. They're provided by donors inspired by Saran's motto, "Somebody who plays Mozart in the morning doesn't smash windows in the evening." Leaving the garbage dump behind us, we traveled north to the Chaco, a vast wild savanna. Estela is a Guarani, a Native American. She's practicing for her Sonidos lessons. Her parents are poor. Like most of the indigenous people in Paraguay, they live off a small plot of land. Luis Saran is traveling to a church training center. He has a strong emotional attachment to the Chaco. Saran has integrated sounds of the jungle and lives of Native Americans into some of his compositions. When he finds time, he visits classes of Sonidos de la Tierra, far from the capital, Asunción. These children are learning a hymn. It's a bit reminiscent of the era of the Jesuit Republic, when the ultimate aim of music lessons was theological. Learning an instrument is no walkover, something even the Jesuits knew back in the 17th century.
Los guaraníes
The Guarani are probably the best-known Native Americans from the Jesuit era for their musicality. Their languages are also very musical. Our ultimate goal is to revive the culture of the indigenous people. I received a very special inspiration from an Indian nation. According to tradition, they sang throughout the night. When I asked the chieftain, "Why do you sing throughout the night?" he said, "The music gives us inspiration to solve our daily problems."
La música nos inspira para encontrar la solución a nuestros propios problemas.
Saran's regular workplace is in downtown Asunción. He's the conductor of the capital symphony orchestra and has an international reputation. But he's never forgotten his roots. That's why he set up the music project Sonidos de la Tierra alongside his conducting commitments. Saran studied in Italy and Germany and has strong ties to Europe. Here he's rehearsing a polka for Paraguay's Independence Day celebrations. When someone has learned to play an instrument through Sonidos, he's expected to teach others. Though Juan was recently accepted into the symphony orchestra, he continues to teach street children the flute and guitar.
These boys have potential. In spite of their weaknesses, you have to encourage them. I want to help them so that one day they recognize and develop their own personality.
The boys have had traumatic lives, so Juan views his lessons as music therapy. He hopes to impart respect, team spirit, and an appreciation of good music. At this stage, perseverance is much more important than musicality. The German capital, Berlin. In front of the Ibero-American Institute, there's a statue of Simón Bolívar, who liberated South America from Spanish rule. This year, Paraguay is celebrating the 200th anniversary of its independence. President Fernando Lugo Méndez has brought a number of musicians to Germany, including Luis Saran, members of the symphony orchestra, and young musicians from Sonidos de la Tierra. Saran is already well known in Berlin. President Lugo has brought the youth orchestra as Paraguay's official visiting card. Juan, who used to make flutes at the garbage dump, is also accompanying the president. Before playing in Berlin, the orchestra gave a performance in London's Westminster Abbey. In Berlin, Juan walked through the famous Brandenburg Gate, where the notorious wall once divided the city. He views the president's invitation as a great honor.
To play in front of our president, and especially in Berlin, is deeply satisfying. It's also a sign of progress. The president listens to us, and he receives the emotions we convey in the music. And the president sees the close connection between our music and our feelings, because it conveys joy as well as sorrow.
Y transmite sentimientos, felicidad, a veces tristeza.
They've also brought their homemade instruments. Their music is born, as it were, out of garbage, from the sadness of the garbage dump to a life of happiness and joy. Behind St. Annen's Church in the southern German town of Nuremberg, the German Jesuits have their headquarters. They've invited talented young musicians from all over the world who are now rehearsing for a tour. Sonidos de la Tierra can also be translated as global sounds, and that's what this youth orchestra calls itself too. Sonidos is an international network. The young musicians come from Paraguay, Colombia, Zimbabwe, India, and China, from Germany, Austria, and Italy. During their break, some of the young musicians have to resort to sign language to communicate. No matter where they come from, all of them had to apply to join Sonidos in the same way, like the German girl Sophia.
I didn't know what Sonidos was, but I thought playing music together with people from all over the world is fantastic. The experience and everything. I want to take part. So I applied and was accepted.
Wei Qin and two young Chinese musicians are from Shanghai. The Jesuits were also missionaries in China. In fact, Sonidos partly depends on the international Jesuit network. Communicating with the Chinese can be quite a challenge for them, including for Paulo from Paraguay, who plays the viola.
It's very strange. You have to get used to the style of Chinese music. And they have a completely different culture.
Luis Saran has composed a piece especially for the youth orchestra that incorporates elements from various parts of the world, linked by a Baroque theme borrowed from Jesuit music.
Since I was a child, I've heard what the Jesuits did for us. It was like a ghost among ruins. Later, I composed pieces inspired by the Jesuit settlements. Then, when Baroque scores from the settlements were found, I immersed myself in their music. I've been researching it for 30 years. Put it this way, I almost feel part of the Jesuit family. Some people even think I'm a Jesuit.
The Global Sounds Orchestra on tour: Cologne, Dresden, Linz, Graz, Vienna, and now Rome. In the church of San Saba, they play a suite by Martin Schmidt, a Jesuit missionary and composer who worked in the South American settlements. Nobody is putting these young musicians under pressure to convert or become missionaries. Luis Saran's vision coincides with the Jesuits' modern concept of evangelization.
Luis Saran always says, a young person who plays Mozart in the morning doesn't throw stones in the afternoon. And that's true. When we introduce people to good things, to beautiful things, and bring them together internationally, we are building a future in which we hope there will be less war. Because these young people have understood, have learnt during the 4 weeks they spent together, that they can make music harmoniously together, and the world can live harmoniously in its plurality. It's a symbol, but it's more than that. It's a living symbol.
Their instruments are tuned. Now they can improvise to their heart's content. They would have liked to have an audience with the Pope, but had to be content with a photo in front of St. Peter's Basilica. The orchestra is accompanied by some volunteered teachers from Paraguay, like Rebecca.
It always thrills me. The way the young people from different countries, who at first can't understand each other at all, can communicate after 2 weeks. But at first they're always running to us, to the volunteers who speak several languages, or to the people who can translate and asking us to interpret.
Finally, the young musicians have their first day off. After a week of rehearsals, they've been on tour for 14 days, with many hours on a bus, different accommodation every night, and host families to get to know. They've made 14 stops. Now Father Peter Balais shows them Rome from a Jesuit perspective. Whether they come from Zimbabwe, India, or Paraguay, this is probably the only chance most of them will ever have to visit Europe. The young South Americans are particularly struck by Rome's long history.
Is an expression in this fountain.
The jail where the apostles Peter and Paul were imprisoned was located in the oldest part of the city.
The Emperor Nero started a persecution of the Christians, and St. Peter was crucified on the other side of the Tiber, where we are at the Vatican.
The highlight of the tour is a concert in the mother church of the Jesuit order, Il Gesù, in Rome. Il Gesù became the architectural model for Jesuit churches all over the world. The Baroque music of the farming settlements was intended to make the Native Americans God-fearing. The Jesuits believed in the healing power of music, as they still do today.
We should launch a similar project in Germany to draw young people from various situations and give them self-confidence and joy through music. When I was in Nuremberg, I used to see the punks hanging out around the train station, and I said, one day we'll form a choir with these young people. They can dress in black, which is conventional at concerts anyway, or whatever, but we should work towards that. Because art, music, also has to revitalize the people in Germany. It touches the deeper roots of European culture. Classical music is part of our cultural heritage, which we contribute to the world, but which is also tremendously important for us.
The young people have brought music from their own countries. Jija is a composition from Zimbabwe. Xisha means summer or harvest time. See the lightning, hear the thunder. Come to us, rain, so we can eat maize. Inspired by the Baroque music of the Jesuits, Luis Serran has created a project that promotes spirituality as well as understanding between cultures. Sonidos de la Tierra.